money manager giving you safety and security? Wouldn't you like to make your money work harder for you? Then you should consider joining philsgang.com, where thousands of individual investors have successfully profited.
This year I'm up 60% on my portfolio. Following your system has been fantastic. I've been with you for about a month and a half now, and I'm already up 7%.
I've been in the business for a long time, and you're really one of the best I've ever heard.
Well, I just want to let you know what a great teacher you are.
For over a decade, philsgang.com's Phil Grandy and Donald Cogswell have been teaching, coaching, and investing right along with all Phil's Gang members.
I want to thank Donnie for market rep. I bought 2,500 shares of AUI and sold it this morning at $820 profit.
Why not join thousands of satisfied Phil's Gang customers today? Go to philsgang.com, philsgang.com, or call 877-600-4264.
Hey everyone, this is Frankie, and this is the Francesco Abbruzzino live news and talk show, and we're back. We're back for another fun-filled hour on the air. Got a lot of things to cover today, such as the ISIS threat, obviously more Ferguson, the militarization of the police, and all kinds of good stuff out there. Probably more than I have the time for. But we're going to hit it hard. Just keep in mind, this is a one-man show, so if you see me doodling around doing different things, it is because I'm the technician, I'm the researcher, I'm the host, I do everything. Phil Granby, that was up before. Remember, if you go to my site, actually, if you're on the Uncensored Report right now, which you probably are if you're watching live, click the picture above me, and that will take you to Phil Grandy's special that he's giving away, a $75 value of a webinar on how to finance, and it's a pretty good option. Just type in scoop in the box when you get there, and you'll be all set. So let's go ahead and get started with the news. And like I said, we got a ton of it. But what I first wanted to do was, I came across an article. It was from the Daily Beast, and it covers basically it does a comparison of Michael Brown, Gaza, and Muslim Americans, and why there isn't a stronger bond between the two. And basically, it's never been a cozy relationship between American Muslims and African Americans, but they're seeing that Ferguson and this whole Gaza thing are bringing about a change. Sorry, my mic is just too low right now. All right, there we go. The Muslim American community hasn't been in great standing with African Americans, and that's due to a lack of empathy, racism, and those are the main culprits out there. What makes this especially astonishing is that 30% of all Muslim Americans are African Americans. And so you would think with that there would be a natural alliance. But that's not the case. That's not the case until now. The shooting of Michael Brown and the heavy-handed response by the police that followed has basically struck a nerve with a lot of the Muslims out there. It's motivated a lot of the American Muslim leaders to speak out publicly in ways that haven't been seen before. And it's primarily on the police misconduct that's been directed towards the African Americans. So it's left a lot of us asking why. A few reasons are why. But one cannot discount the whole Gaza thing. Look at what's happening there. The tear gas being attacked. It's similar to what's happening in Ferguson. More specifically, young Palestinians who commented on Twitter about how to, on this Michael Brown shooting, on how to handle the case. They were drawing the connections between what's going on in Gaza and what's happening in Ferguson, which in some levels is a shame, in some levels is a good thing. Palestinians, including doctors out there in Palestine, even offered advice, and this is all via Twitter, Facebook, to protesters of Ferguson on how to deal with the tear gas, how to deal with it being fired at them, their eyes and everything, and the experience that they've had with security forces in Israel. The support by Palestinians for Brown and the protesters, though, should not be surprising. It shouldn't be at all. Oppressed people often stand together in solidarity, and that's basically what we're seeing. That's why this relationship and how so many Muslim Americans that we don't see broad support with the African Americans, and you got to look at exactly why. You know, for Muslims who are black, tales of racism directed towards them by other Muslims is very commonplace there. But a growing number of these Muslim Americans are just pushing back against the types of racism that they've been seeing and experiencing within their own community. You know, there seems to be, in the past, a lack of empathy by Muslims towards African Americans. And this stems in part by the fact that certain immigrant Muslims bring with them a negative view of blacks in America. This is a negative perception that they've picked up in countries of their birth. These Muslims who own stores in black neighborhoods often interact only with black people of the lower socioeconomic scale. So, and many of them are criminals. Thus, they define all blacks as this way. And they basically have that stereotype within the Muslim community. Some African Americans are hostile towards the Muslims because they own the stores within their communities. They see the liquor stores as just another example of a non-black owned business that's been exploited in their community, and they're upset about it. But increasingly, Muslims have been working with African Americans on issues of police brutality and racial profiling because they've been experiencing this a lot, especially since 9/11. So with respect to Michael Brown, the community responded in many ways. Many ways. You had CAIR, their office urged the imams across the country to discuss the shooting of Michael Brown, to discuss racial equality or inequality. And Muslims have they basically came out and said that Muslims have the responsibility to stand for those who have been marginalized or suffered injustice. Because if you don't stop, you don't step in, you don't stand up, it's only going to get worse. So this evolution within the Muslim community is also linked to the way we have been treated by the police. We have been basically, Muslims, I shouldn't really be saying we, have been targeted with widespread profiling and surveillance, especially by the NYPD. And it's simply due to their faith in what's happened over on 911. Nothing helps you to relate to the experience of others who have been victims of police misconduct like being the victim yourself. You get it. You empathize. You understand. So the question is this the tipping point? Is this the tipping point for Muslims to join with people of color and to fight issues from police misconduct to immigration reform? I don't know. Only time will tell. But many Muslims out there are optimistic. And I'd like to remain optimistic. You're seeing an increased number of Muslims standing up for African Americans. That should make them proud. Make them proud. And make them understand and hopefully work together. But what about this whole thing? What has basically the Michael Brown situation, or whatever it's commonly known now as Ferguson? Is this? Are people now? I almost made a mistake and said, "Is this turning America into a war zone?" But it's not. Is this waking many Americans up? This war zone to the tyranny that we've been facing. That we live basically in a state of undeclared martial law. That in many cases, we, the people, are the enemy. And should we be concerned about that? Life in America, in an American police state, it's an endless series of don'ts delivered. And at the end, it's a loaded gun, basically. You don't talk back to police officers. Don't even think about defending yourself against a SWAT team raid. There's about, 80,000 a year? Don't run when a cop is nearby, because you might be mistaken as a fleeing criminal, and you don't want that to happen. Don't carry a cane, because it might be mistaken as a gun. Don't expect privacy when you're in public. And don't let your kids walk alone to the park alone, playground. You heard recently of a parent that was, I think they were arrested because their kid walked alone to the playground. Don't engage in nonviolent protests near government officials because it might be construed as negative. You don't want to try to grow vegetables in your front yard. They don't want you to be self-sufficient. Don't play music for tips at the metro station. They're going to cramp down on you. Don't feed whales, and so on, and so on, and so on. I'm sure you get my gist. Basically, for those who resist, who dare to act independently, God forbid, think for themselves, they march to the beat of a different drummer, you're going to see that the consequences are invariably a one-way trip to the local jail or death. And this should be concerning many of us. And what we as Americans have to understand, what you as an American have to understand, is what we have chosen is to ignore. What we are fearfully turn a blind eye to, lest the reality prove too jarring, and we don't want to deal with it. And it is the fact that we no longer live in the city on the hill, a beacon of freedom all around the world. And far from being some type of shining example of democracy at work, we have become a lesson for the world in how quickly your freedom can turn to tyranny. And we saw that. We've seen it at Ferguson. We've seen that slippery slope by which one freedom loving people can be branded, shackled, and fooled into believing that their prisoners' walls are there. In fact, you're seeing all that in Ferguson just about. Think about it. Do you think those Al Jazeera filmers, the Al Jazeera news people, do you think that 1 second they're having their freedom, did they realize that within seconds they would have rubber bullets shot with them? That the police would be harassing them because they're capturing a moment on camera? They're producing the news? Now, basically, America's spent, half a century exporting war to foreign lands. We profit from these wars immensely. And creating a national economy seemingly dependent upon these spoils of the war. That's what it's come across as. So, we failed, basically, and there goes my pen, we failed to protest when the war hawks turned their profit-driven appetites on us. They bring home these spoils of war, the military tanks, the grenade launchers, Cavalier helmets, assault rifles, gas masks, the list goes on. And they distribute them for free to our local police agencies. And they're being used to secure the homeland against we, the people. We have become the enemy. How? And when? It's not just the Defense Department that's passing out this free equipment to the local police. It's done through the Homeland, the Justice, and the 1033 program. Since the early 1990s, the Justice Department has worked with the Pentagon to fund military technology for local police departments. And then there are the billions of dollars worth of federal grants distributed by Homeland Security. And who's making the money off this? The military-grade manufacturers out there. The ones that are producing the weapons. They're making a killing. And all this is enabling the police departments to go to on basically a buying spree for our highly questionable military-grade supplies that are better suited for the fields of Iraq, the battlefields of Iraq, of Afghanistan. So is it any wonder that we now find ourselves in the midst of a war zone? After all, we basically are living in a undeclared state of undeclared martial law. We have become the enemy. If you're against what Obama's views are, guess what? You're a terrorist. If you're a Tea Party, are you a terrorist? And this whole thing that's going on there, one thing that sickens me, I'm looking at a picture up here on as I'm talking, one of my resources, and that's the looting that's taking place there in Ferguson. One picture I can't get out of my head, and it says that the police just stood there as all this looting and burning was taking place. Yet they were arresting many of the protesters. Many of the protesters were exercising their basic rights. There were a couple provocateurs there that were trying to incite things. Go after them, that's fine. But I'm amazed that out of the 39 people arrested, they were all protesters. None of them were looters. Is this crazy? And what about these looters? They're decimating black-owned businesses. Decimating businesses that contribute back to their economy. And they went out this article. Who's this article by? This is by Breitbart. And they're talking how they went out there and talked to these people that are running their businesses and the difficulties that they've experienced over the past 10, 11 days since the Michael Brown shooting. And that they're suffering this major financial blow from the constant rioting, the vandalism, and the looting that takes place. Basically, these looters and vandals are coming in. They're smashing those storefronts. They're painting graffiti everywhere. They're stealing property. They're burning businesses. Some stores are reopening, and they're plugging up the windows with plywood, saying open for business. And some have even gone so far to say that this is a black-owned business. But many of these store owners are afraid. They're afraid to come back. They don't know what's going to happen. They don't feel secure. They don't feel as though the police are protecting them. And this should be concerning. Also, they're concerned about releasing their business name when they talk to the different papers because they're afraid of retribution by the protesters. They don't want their facility, their clinic, their business to be burnt down. It's happened to a few people already. And additionally, they're concerned that damages done may not be covered by the insurance company. So they'll take this significant financial loss. So what are the residents of Ferguson thinking? Now, I do realize that only 3 people that were arrested out of the 39 were from Ferguson. And what they're suspecting is that many of the people that are coming into town and looting are outsiders taking advantage of the situation. Which I hope, in some ways I hope is true, because I would hope that you as a resident would not do this to your community. You wouldn't do it to your community. But I think the cops have to get tougher on these looters. Let the protesters walk. If it's peaceful, let them walk. The only reason they're getting more aggressive is because the officers are getting aggressive with them. I put up on my Educate Inspire page yesterday the white officer that was sitting there with a machine gun saying, "I'll effing kill you." That's going to incite things. Wearing military garb, incite things. Bringing out military takes, incite things. Let the protesters walk down the street. Don't try to control it. If they want to walk one direction, let them go. Focus on the looters. We need to do that. Now, what I did do yesterday is I sent out a page that basically shows the database of military equipment that local police departments are stockpiling. It's on my Educate Inspire page, on my local scoops, on my parent page. And you can go there, basically plug in. Like I found out in Sarasota here, we have, since 2007, 3 grenade launchers. What in God's name does my local police office need grenade launchers for? That's the question. I have no idea. There's no doubt that domestic law enforcement agencies on every single level have been repping up for this militarized effort. And it's gotten so bad that it's prompted people like Senator Rand Paul to call for demilitarization of the domestic police force. The one thing Ferguson has done is brought more attention to the fact that the local police are militarized. And it just doesn't stop there. Like I said, there's legislation right now in the Congress called RAD, the acronym's RAD, and it's cracking down on USDA, the EPA, the FDA, because all these are militarized. And so they're buying ammo up left and right, and it's a major concern. Sorry about that. Someone just walked in here talking during my show. All right, so my train of thought. Okay. Basically, we know that the Homeland Security has been buying up billions of rounds of ammo, military-grade rifles, armored vehicles, riot gear, and all that stuff. And we've seen mass policing during episodes like Ferguson, and it's brought a lot of this to light. And it's been done under grant programs with Homeland, the Department of Homeland, Department of Justice, and this 1033 program that allows local police departments to obtain military-grade equipment. Since the inception of this program, basically they're stating that they've transferred about $5.1 billion worth of property out from the military to police forces. $5.1 billion. You'll find stuff from mine-resistant vehicles to grenade launchers, like I mentioned, to night vision goggles, high-powered assault rifles. And these are just an example of the heavy militarization efforts by domestic law enforcement agencies. James Quinn of the Burning Platform did a similar investigation into the local area, and he found that his cops in the county of Montgomery, Pennsylvania, now have $733,000 worth of mine-resistant vehicles, $245,000 worth of armored personnel carriers. Why? Why is this needed? Our U.S. government has long been wargaming large-scale economic collapse scenarios and civil unrest simulations, which is leaving Americans wondering if they know something we don't. So use this database, check it out. See what your county is purchasing. And then contact your local politicians, your police force, your county police, and ask them, why is this necessary? Why do you have all this equipment? All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I think we're going to talk a little bit about ISIS, and we'll take it from there.
That's 877.
And all those products can be found on the uncensoredreport.com or the roguerant.com. Just go to my store and click through there, and I'll get credit for it. I got a revenue deal with them, so it's important that you go through there and check them out. Iodine, I take iodine every day. It's not in salt anymore. Or fluoride shield. That fluoride is dumbing us down right now, so we got to get it out of our system, and it's everywhere. So let's go ahead and start talking about a little bit about ISIS and the trouble that's coming from them, the stage provocations ahead. And, we have to ask some good questions. And I think I was watching Fox News this morning when I was at the gym. And a question that came up that people keep asking is, why is it that ISIS is allowed to operate seemingly with no penalty? We're actually financing them in Syria. Why aren't we bombing them in Syria? That's their base. And the president hasn't come out and answered it. And I'll tell you why. Because we've been funding them. We've been training them. They're part of the three different rebels that are fighting the Syrian government that the United States wants to overthrow. And I've said it on the show. I've given you the information. We've been training them in Jordan. We've been financing them through surrogates. Al-Nusra, them, Al-Qaeda, they're all over there. So we're not bombing them for a reason. So why is it's okay for them to operate with impunity in Syria, but not in Iraq? I tell you why. It's all about special interest. And that's what Obama's doing, is he's basically protecting his special interest. But with this whole James Foley incident, this is the brutal murder of an American. He had his head cut off. There's been a lot of anger and aggression across the Western world. And they're just seeing that, hey, there's two objectives here. One is to create a plausible deniability for the West that it created this ISIS group in Syria and Iraq. The other is to create further pretext to justify this resurgence that is directed, this direct U.S. military intervention across the region. Like I said, we finance, we train, we basically brought ISIS to life. They're using our guns in Iraq. So, while we got this focus on ISIS in Iraq, there's still this other war. and it's being waged over in Syria. Syrian forces have continued to make gains across the country. They're kicking ISIS's back. It's almost embarrassing for the U.S. They're routing this NATO-backed terrorist force, and they're restoring the cities and towns that have been ravaged for years. This ISIS group is doing the very damn same stuff over in Iraq, folks, yet you weren't hearing about it because they were helping the president, the United States, out with their agenda, so you didn't hear about it. The propagandist major media was not talking about it. But out of Senley, they're interfering with our interest, our agenda in Iraq, and it's news. It's news. It was the West itself that created them, specifically to confront the Iranian influence there, stretching from Tehran through Baghdad, Damascus, and along the Lebanon. The elimination of ISIS and the terrorist organizations fighting or alongside or under them is under their banner, without first achieving regime change in Damascus, would effectively mean that the United States had been beaten in the Middle East. And they're not going to allow that. To intervene before the death blow is delivered to NATO-backed terrorists in Syria and before the tide is turned against Iraq, the West may try to provoke some kind of black flag event, which will give them the pretext to take military action in Syria. Think about it. We got to go after ISIS now in Syria. ISIS is getting their butts beat. They're getting kicked back. So the thought is, hey, we're going to go in there. We're going to beat up on ISIS. We're going to kick them back. Oh, and then incidentally, we got to go in and take care of the Syrian army and take over Syria and have a nation building again, regime change. But this death of James Foley, it's created a significant outrage amongst many people in the public. It has created the illusion of confrontation between the United States and ISIS. And it allows, basically, it allowed ISIS to validate itself. The Western media is still struggling to maintain this illusion that ISIS stands apart from the rest of the terrorists operating in Syria, but it doesn't. The West is simultaneously bolstering ISIS in Syria under the guise of arming and aiding moderates, while conducts token airstrikes on ISIS in Iraq to give people the perception that they're cracking down on them. Warnings of these, you got these weapons. They took over the weapons. And the warnings of these weapons might be diverted to extremist factions has been out there for a while. We've actually been arming them. They've been in their arms for years. But you're just not hearing about it. How about that? The other thing you're not hearing about either is that MH17 disaster in Ukraine that was long been buried and forgotten in the Western media. They were quick to run with the baseless accusations that Obama was making, stating that the Russians shot him down. Now much of the evidence is pointing that it was a black flag attempt by the Ukrainians to try to drive us into the war, try to pull us in there. But could this happen in the Middle East? Could this be the pretext? Let's bring down a plane there, attributed to the extremists in Syria, Iraq, give the West a pretext to intervene with military force. Think about it. And basically the West, America, England, all the Western countries, we've proven that we'll stop at nothing to advance our agenda, even in the most incremental ways. The loss of human life is nothing more of a consequence to them and their design than to a loss at a pawn of chess. It's meaningless, a loss of life, basically. These staged provocations still manipulate large segments of the population. And that perception. Think about it. Exposing them and disarming them globally of these weapons is essentially preventing them from doing tragedies like shooting down another plane or killing a Foley. You will have to kill thousands of Syrians and Iraqis to accomplish this. Then I think basically the U.S. is playing a dangerous game. And now ISIS is threatening to come here. They're saying the blood's going to spill in the streets of the United States. Yeah, most Americans aren't taking them seriously. They're laughing at them. But do you realize that they're larger, stronger, financially stronger, all around stronger than Al-Qaeda was when they bombed the Twin Towers? Or I should say, suppose that there's some concern with that one. But if these psychopaths are running around crucifying and beheading lots of people, and then they said that they wanted to drown your family in blood, would you be inclined to take them seriously? Yet many Americans aren't. Most Americans seem to be completely and totally unconcerned about this ISIS group. I don't know if it's the video games, the reality TV, too much fluoride in their diet. I don't know what the issue is. Maybe the propagandist major media is not pushing the concern enough. They're out there, folks. ISIS is out there, and every single day taking our territory. They're hacking off innocent people's heads. You see it all the time. The videos are even out there. They control vast swaths of land in Syria and Iraq. And now they're saying, we want Americans. They're absolute nut jobs. And if given the opportunity, there's probably very little that they would not be willing to do to come here. This one guy that chopped off Foley's head, his name's John with a British accent. And the biggest concern is that ISIS people blend into other countries, other Western countries. And that they may have already blended in within the United States, within England. I think they said all three of them were English speaking, so they nicknamed them the Beatles. And what say you on that? So at this point, I just don't get it. I don't understand why Americans are not taking this ISIS group seriously. These guys seem to be revel in the killing of their opponents in some of the most gruesome ways imaginable. And they are now threatening to attack U.S. targets and have the streets of America flowing in blood. They put many videos. They had this one video out there. It's on this site right here. It says that the extremist groups posted a chilling video showing a blood-spattered star and stripes next to the jihadist flag with the message in English, "We will drown you in blood." Nut jobs. Nut jobs. And it was accompanied with photographs of Americans who were beheaded in Iraq. So, to me, it seems clear that they actually intend to do what they're saying. And we have to be vigilant of this. But you gotta wonder, are they capable of doing it? If Al-Qaeda was, will ISIS be able to? Are they actually capable of coming over here and conducting some kind of attacks? Do you know what that would do to the psyche of the American people? These are all legitimate questions, people. Some would claim that ISIS possesses no ability to conduct operations outside the Middle East. Others would say, man, they do. And you need to be concerned. Could they actually be here? Even the most hardcore skeptics has to admit that anything is possible. And just look at how porous the border is. If a jihadist from ISIS wanted to get in this country, border security would not be an issue. If the Obama administration had any concern for our national security, instead of dropping these millions of dollars in bombs in Iraq, to give the perception, the illusion that they're doing stuff, they would do something with that border as putting up of some type of postings. Let's build a fence. Let's put more security there. Let's get serious about sending these illegals back. Without a doubt, they know that the men from the Middle East are constantly crossing our southern border. We just found an Islamic prayer rug abandoned there not too long ago over in Arizona. You got all the Mexican gangs. They're getting up to $50,000 a head to bring people in. So Obama, members of Congress, the Senate, they know what to do. And yes, I know, like I said, the U.S. government funded and trained ISIS fighters at various times. The goal then was to topple Syria. And they're using captured American weapons now in Iraq. But at this point, it appears that nobody can control these guys. It's an organization that seems to absolutely fear nothing, and their savagery is unprecedented. So we need to realize these guys are far more dangerous than Al-Qaeda ever was. If they get opportunity, they will kill as many as possible, and they will celebrate while doing it. If you are deluded into thinking that Obama can stop them, then I feel sorry for you, because that's not going to happen. He's too busy out golfing. We are facing an entire army of suicide maniacs that are more than willing to die in advance of their cause. They hate America. They hate Americans. They hate everything we stand for. And if these psychopaths are able to get their hands on weapons of mass destruction, watch out. And if it ever happens, a lot more Americans will start to taking their threats to drown in the streets of blood a little bit more seriously. But by then, we'll be too late. By then, we'll be too late. So, good food for thought there. Let's go ahead. We're going to take another quick break so I can get a drink of water and gather my thoughts, and we'll be right back.
600-4264. Call today. Is your money manager giving you safety and security? Wouldn't you like to make your money work harder for you? Then you should consider joining philsgang.com, where thousands of individual investors have successfully profited.
This year I'm up 60% on my portfolio. Following your system has been fantastic. I've been with you for about a month and a half now, and I'm already up 7%.
I've been in the business for a long time, and you're really one of the best I've ever heard.
Well, I just want to let you know what a great teacher you are.
For over a decade, philsgang.com's Phil Grandy and Donald Cogswell have been teaching, coaching, and investing right along with all Phil's Gang members.
I want to thank Donnie for market wrap. I bought 2,500 shares of AUI and sold it this morning at $820 profit.
Why not join thousands of satisfied Phil's Gang customers today? Go to philsgang.com, philsgang.com, or call 877-600-4264. That's 877-600-4264. Call today.
All right, folks, I'm back, and now we're going to pop over, since we were talking about the porous border and if ISIS could penetrate it, which we all know they could, I thought we'd start talking a little bit more about the whole border thing, because immigration's sort of taken a seat to the Ferguson, to ISIS, and people aren't really talking about it anymore. And so what we need to look at, I wanted to look at the humanitarian crisis, and is there going to be some kind of crime wave that's associated with it, sort of like the Cuban boat list. Then there is this one resource that I looked at that has immigration on it, and it's saying basically that Americans want Obama to pull back, and they're not for giving these illegals college, giving them access to jobs and Social Security numbers and all that stuff. There is an article, too, about a dreamer that killed somebody, yet was let out of jail. Let out of jail. Or how about the illegal alien that started a massive fire on a Texas ranch? Let's talk about this dreamer who killed 2 girls in a hit and run, and they're not going to deport this dreamer. This is basically somebody that's benefited from Obama's deferred action for childhood arrivals. DACA. Hit and run, 2 little kids out there playing. Let me see, they were Anna and Abigail Robinson, 6 and 11. They were playing in a leaf pile in October when Cynthia Garcia Cisneros, she ran them over, was drunk, and killed them. And guess what? She won't be deported. A judge has dismissed the whole deportation case. Now, what do you think about your illegals? That's right. They dismissed it against, we'll call her, what's her name again? Cynthia? Yeah, Cynthia. And basically they said as a result of the hearing, she can basically, it means she can go on, she can get paperwork, she can get a work permit, she can get a Social Security number. And she's doing this all under the DACA. And she's going to get a driver's license too, folks. You know, the parents are great enough to forgive this person. I wouldn't forgive them. But that's what's happening with a lot of these illegals. You got that one that started the massive South Texas fire. There was a group of aliens. They were coming across. They're smugglers and them. They're coyotes. They started this massive grass fire on a ranch in South Texas. Then they were being pursued by Border Patrol. They had this car carrying the illegal aliens, went off the roadway, they bailed out. They came to a stop on some dry grass and caught on fire. This is at the Locopa Ranch. Locopa Ranch. And this is an area known for illegal immigrations. But they went out there and they caused this huge fire after they bailed out of the car. And the article goes on to talk about the heat and how many are dying of dehydration. And I feel for them in that regard. But we need to do something. Like I said, it's a humanitarian crisis, folks. Humanitarian crisis. It's taking place at our southern border. And that's why we get countries, like I said yesterday, Russia, China, the UN, trying to tell us that we need to follow international standards because we're not being humanitarian enough. People are dying at your southern border. But I can tell you, many countries, and I've traveled internationally all over the place, they would not allow immigrants to flow in illegally, give them socials, set them up with housing, set them up with medical, set them up with entitlement programs. It just wouldn't happen, folks. So we heard about we got the unaccompanied children, and they've been tragically released into our nation, and there's not really any parental oversight. You know, we're releasing them with people they say may or may not be their parents or family. It's just painting a horrifying picture, a picture that has affected compassionate, caring Americans because they're seeing these kids. So we can sit there, we care, we cry for them, we rush out to help them because we're seeing their beautiful little faces on TV and we feel sorry for them. But what's going to happen, folks? And what many are not seeing is that the reality of the modern day version of Castro's Muriel boat lift. And it's going to be coming to cities near you soon. That is because only about 20% of those now rushing across the border are actually innocent children. The rest are gangsters, MS-13. They're dangerous felons. They're members of gangs. They're from the Middle East. Possible terrorists. Trying to avoid the TSA, get into the country. So if you remember history, with this Muriel boat lift, Castro decided to empty out the prisons and make those felons Americans problem by sending them over here by the boatloads in Miami. You ever see Scarface with Al Pacino? We were overwhelmed, and we had a ton of compassion for these refugees. But soon we started seeing crime, thefts, rapes, drugs. And we started realizing that Castro exported his problem to us. And it continues to be a problem with the Cubans over there in Miami. Now, reports are now indicating that a great many of these children that are crossing the border in the South actually are murderers and members of MS-13. Several have been found guilty of murder, extortion, crime, money laundering back in their home countries. But we're housing these refugees. And within these refugee camps, you got the fights between rival gangs and everything else that they're bringing into our country. Even before this latest invasion of illegal crimes committed by alien criminals such as rape, murder, or drugs, were costing us $1.6 billion in our prisons expenses. Now multiply that even significantly more. These gangs like this MS-13 contribute most of the crime in the ranks of the illegals. It's out of El Salvador, and they've basically taken over the Crips and the Bloods. And they predict there's about 70,000 of them here in the U.S. Yeah, you don't hear a lot about it, do you? These gangs, they target high school kids usually, even middle school. They go out, they recruit them. They initiate them into their gangs with brutal attacks on each other. They threaten and terrorize young school students who aren't part of the gang and control these school zones. So kids get reluctant to go to school over the gangs. They get robbed, they get beat up, and all that fun stuff, right? But the fact is that this latest invasion of illegals is not about poor children coming for a better life. That's just a smokescreen that Obama and the Democrats have put up. It's about the criminal violence and the effort to destroy the U.S. border security. In part, it is a power play by violent Mexican drug cartels. It's about money. It's about the drugs. And they're selling passage into the United States for big bucks, and people are buying into it. They're jumping on board, and rightfully so. It's happening the worst in what we call the sanctuary cities, where these politicians have decided it's good to give out the help to these guys and encourage the community to help the illegals, to house them. And these communities can't ask, which country are you from? What's your origin? Why are you here? Any crimes you committed? And they're permitting about 20 million illegals into the country. Drug smugglers, child sex rings, ID forgery, all that stuff. They provide them with income, identification, credit, housing, education, medical. And it's all at our expense. These entitlements we're paying for. I think the number is somewhere around $300 billion a year, which buys a lot of politicians. But you don't hear anyone talking about this. None of the politicians along the border states talk about it. And it's no surprise that a lot of the politicians do nothing to stop it because of the greed. Our fear of their greed are destroying America. These politicians are doing it. And contrary to what the propagandist major media reports, not all these illegals are crossing the border are poor Hispanics from Central America. In fact, these poor are paying as much as $2,000 for this journey. I know a few Americans that don't have $2,000 and can use it. The poor in Central America don't come by such sums so easily. So how do they raise it? That's a good question. According to the National Association of Former Border Patrol Officers, a large group of Chinese are paying $100,000 each to cross the border. Even Hezbollah is crossing the border. These are transnational criminal crossings over a border to harm Americans. Yet Obama's out playing around a golf. Even, on a side story, I was watching, and after he gave the press conference, he showed up in his polo, no tie, no suit. He discussed fully the chopping off the head and showed his anger, his angst against it, and then went straight to the golf course. Compare that to Cameron, who found out they were British citizens, chopping the heads off. He was on vacation for one day and he canceled vacation. Big difference in leadership there. But back to this, I digress. So on the immigration issue, the federal government is moving to lock away more and more land in the national monuments under the excuse that it's for environmental protection. But the real winners of this are the cartels. 62% of the Arizona-Mexican borders are in federal land. Federal land that basically is being ran by Obama, and he's saying, let them pass through. So they're buying up all this federal land. They're saying, we're doing it for the environment. And what it's doing is giving all these immigrants access into our country, unbridled access. So who's the real winner? The real winner is the cartels. The Border Patrol doesn't have unfettered access to those federal lands. But guess who does? The drug cartels. They use those lands. There's no law enforcement out there, no human activity. And it's all compliments of the government. But people don't know that. They don't realize that. It's not out there in the papers. And meanwhile, the Americans just get this misdirected policy. Then the borders of the nation is wide open. Even before this current immigration thing started, 4,000 illegal immigrants per day walked into our nation. And there's an entire industry, the coyote industry, that's out there bringing them in. There's safe houses, there's camps, there's the tunnels, there's a transportation system. So, something to think about. The Department of Homeland Security admits that there's no law enforcement officials that are looking for a vast majority of these 18 to 12 million illegals that are throughout the country. So why show up for your court date. And in this middle of this current invasion, the Border Patrol has been told essentially to stand down. Don't do anything. It's a humanitarian effort. These are refugees. Apparently, the federal government has more compassion for the criminals invading our nation than it does for actual American citizens that have to deal with the negative impact of the quality of life and national security. Because the politicians are not going to enforce our laws. It is politically correct to express compassion for the plight of those who steal into the country under cover of night. It's politically correct to be sensitive to the feelings of those of the Middle Eastern descent. It's politically correct to impose blacklist national ID cards, searches of private property without warrants, strip search little old ladies at the airports, under the excuse of fighting terrorism for your safety. But it's not politically correct to say these things are a danger to our liberties and that they must be stopped at all costs. No. That would show concern for the plight of American citizens who are standing in the pathway of these criminals. And that's why many people came out in this poll. And they gave some numbers, and they basically talked about the immigration. Who did this? This is just says poll. It's from Breitbart. And many out there aren't happy with Obama wanting to give out worker guest permits, wanting to help these guys with entitlements. Independents, 47% were more. Let me see the breakdown here. The survey also revealed that an overwhelming majority of Americans want more enforcement of our country's immigration and employers to give preference to them. And if I recall yesterday when I was reading this, they said, look, we're sick and tired of hearing that we will not work these jobs. Who's saying we won't work these jobs? We want jobs, and if that's the job, we'll work it. 83% of the whites out there said, hey, we will work those jobs. But we can't because the illegals are coming in and doing it cheaper. And I think overwhelming 75% want more enforcement of our immigration laws. They want these kids to be sent back. They want a message that you can't send your kids here. On executive amnesty, 74 of the people were against it. They believe benefits and access to jobs for illegal immigrants should be reduced. Again, trying to compel these people to get out of here and stop coming across the border. And Americans also do not have much tolerance for allowing illegal immigrants to stay. In their mind, you're getting all these entitlements. You're taking away from me. And they're not for that, and rightfully so. Americans may be more in favor of hitting the pause button if they had a better understanding of how many immigrants the country's already admitted on an annual basis, folks. The country admits basically 1 million legal permanent residents and about 700,000 guest workers. And they're not leaving. So we should all be concerned about that. All right, I don't have enough time to go into most of my other. Let me see if I got a quick story I could cover here. No, and that's primarily because I talk too much. The old soul. I could do this. Let's see. This is just something I saw and I put it out there, and it was cute. Oh, it's not going to pull it up. Okay, that's it then. We're going to call it a day for the Francesco Abbruzzino Show. Now, remember my sponsors. Phil Grandy, that $75 value for free. That's good. Great. Listen, if you're not sure if you want it, sign up. It's free. There's only 100 slots, so secure your 100 slot. Then listen to him. He's on from 3 to 5 at philsgang.com. See if this is something you might want to be interested in. Do the research. This guy's a guru from what I'm hearing. Iodine, get it from me for InfoWars. Just click my link. I'll get the credit. Longevity, a great protein mix. Click my link. It's all under my store. Also, I have their banners all over my site. Apparel. Educate, inspire, change. Get that great apparel. It fits great, looks great. Coffee mug is great. All right, so that's it. We will see you tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Everybody have a great day.